What's going on, FA Nation? My name is Justin Fensterman, along with James Grande, and you are tuned in to the DFS NBA live stream. Grande, we got 6 games. How's my little Bubba Sparks doing?
We were just talking about it before you hopped into the call. I can't get every time I think of you, I instantly think of Deliverance.
Dude, we're gonna get Deliverance on some picks tonight. That's what I'm telling you, Grande.
I completely believe it. Ronis has a really nice looking playbook with some updates even up at the top based on the injury news that's come out. So he's confident. I'm confident. You're confident. Matt Sells, the producer, big thanks to him, is confident. He just told us in our ear right now that he's confident as well. So I'm ready to go, Fancy.
Then let's do it. Why don't we do this, Grande? I like going over the injury news with you very quickly. We'll keep everybody up to date as the next however many minutes that we're bothering you. No, we're not bothering you. You love us. You at least love me, right? Grande, half and half, let's just say. But right now, Joel Embiid, he's expected to be in, and Jimmy Butler's going to be out. Terry Rozier's the big one, Grande, because you know what happens if Rozier is out. A whole lot more usage going to those forwards. What do you think?
Yeah, not just the forwards, too. I mean, Devontae Graham coming off 60 fantasy points last game. So I think Rozier's absence would be a big deal for everybody involved, just, based on his usage rate this year. I also think, it's a bonus on the flip side of the game. There's no Jimmy Butler defense looming either for whoever. Like if Rozier does sit out, then Graham won't see Jimmy Butler defense, and right. Cody Martin and all these guys won't see that, tough 40-plus minutes of just in-your-face defense. So I think it does benefit a lot of people. I think the Martins would be my, if we're not talking about just Devontae Graham, who's the obvious choice, and we're talking about Miles Bridges, who, is another obvious. I think the Martins, who are both coming off really good games, are really nice value options here if Rozier does sit.
Yeah, other injuries. You were talking about Jimmy Butler. Tyler Hero is expected to return in this game, but the big question is how many minutes will he play? Because that's going to impact one of the plays I like. We'll talk about it in a bit from Ronas's playbook, but that could definitely take shots away from some of the other Heat options. Other injury news that we should talk about quickly, Rudy Gobert is questionable. He is sick. That can make a major impactful pivot for us when it comes to the center position. A lot of interesting injuries. Bruce Brown is questionable. Kendrick Nunn expected to play. And then you've got some other injuries such as John Henson being out for Detroit. Dorian Finney-Smith questionable. Jay Crowder available for Miami. No Porzingis. No Seth Curry for Dallas. So Grande, shall we start off with some point guards?
Yeah, and I think we are in a good place since we're starting off at point guards. Terry Rozier officially ruled out.
Wow. Okay, so we're going to be pivoting, especially in those GPPs, to those Hornets options. That's the wasteland for the most part. They gave you some guys. You're going with the Martins. Miles Bridges, he has cooled off a bit lately, was getting hot, but now cooled off. I can't put too much trust into him. So let's talk about the Mavs, because we just mentioned a few key injuries. Luka Daanish, I mean, at this point, Grande, he's 11K. I mean, you know what you're paying for when it comes to Luka, but no Porzingis. How much better can it actually get?
I mean, I don't think it needs to necessarily get any better if we're getting a floor of 60 and a ceiling of 75, right? I mean, if he gets us the 60 even as a floor, I mean, he still surpasses 5x value. There's not many other people on this slate that can get us 60 and on any given slate. So I don't see a scenario where I'm fading Luka Daanish tonight.
I've got one bugaboo.
The injury.
No, it's not even the injury. He's back. Not Lord Voldemort. Gary Harris is back.
It's true.
He's healthy again. He's playing better. Shades of the Gary Harris that we're used to from last season, especially on the offensive side. But defensively, Grande, when it comes to any of these Denver Nuggets, this is the guy that's going to cause problems on the perimeter.
And it could be a correlation to Luka not playing very well against Dallas this year, Denver, shooting 39% from the floor. And you could be onto something. But also, we do have to factor in, as much as we do appreciate how good of a perimeter defender Gary Harris is, if Luka is going well, it really doesn't matter. I mean, and they're going to, obviously, he's going to be the priority option tonight with no Porzingis. I will take that risk, and I get that there are guys to pivot to. I get there's Trae Young on this slate against your New York Knicks. I get it.
Don't call him that. Don't call him that. Okay, we don't talk about that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Your former.
No. We don't.
Okay. The Spike Lee's former favorite team. I mean, I get that pivot, but I also think that there's even more in the tank for Luka potentially because he's going to be taking on more of a scoring role here. And I mean, if he still triple doubles and gets us 40, I mean, we could legitimately be looking at 80. I don't know if Young could get us 80. I think he can. We've seen it, but I still think the floor/ceiling is higher for Luka, just being the only guy in Dallas right now.
And because of that, Grande, again, and I'm thinking if I'm Mike Malone, I'm just thinking that at this point, why don't you just put Barton and Harris on Luka the entire night? Let Tim Hardaway Jr. have his way. It's one guy. Can't really rely on anybody else. They should just put those two guys on Luka the entire night, no matter what. It seems too easy. I just thought about that, and I don't have a game of coaching experience.
I mean, it definitely makes sense, and I'm not saying they won't even do that, but we also got to consider if Tim Hardaway gets hot, right? Now, let's just use him as a perfect example because he is a very streaky shooter. I mean, we could be looking at 11 assists for Luka at halftime if right. Tim Hardaway is open on the perimeter all this game. And then, coming out in the second half, they're now guarding Tim Hardaway. Then Luka gets his in the second half. And we're talking about a guy that goes 30 and 20 potentially, because I don't think that's crazy to think about without Porzingis and Seth Curry on the floor. And then we're talking about a guy with GPP winning upside. So I don't think I'm going to fade him. The ownership projections speak to that as well. I mean, 62% projection in a tournament. I mean, we get the projections as tournament projections in terms of ownership. That is a lot of ownership going his way. Plus, Fancy, let's say you're playing in a cash game, right? Let's just flip this on the other spectrum. If Luka goes for 70 and you don't have him in cash, you do not make money. You will not win a single dollar. So in cash, I'm playing Luka. In tournaments, I'm playing Luka simply because if I don't have 70 points in my lineup from Luka, I'm not winning any money tonight.
Who knows how to escape the front court press, the full court press? James Grande. That is how you debate right there. Let's move on to Lonzo Ball. Talk about him because I start to wonder how much is too much to pay for him. But the multi-category production, I don't like to use the word upside, so let's just use the word ceiling. Going up against De'Aaron Fox, which is a very easy matchup. You like this price point tonight at $7,900?
I mean, I like the matchup, and I agree the price point is getting a little scary, but we're also seeing a guy who's been consistently putting up 40-plus fantasy points, and he went for a stretch of 30 straight. And Fancy, it's not. We know from his history in the NBA, we know his ability to stuff the box score. It's been the scoring that's really impressed me.
Those threes, man,
right? Especially the 3-point shooting, right? And we heard all about the improved shooting touch and the stroke in the offseason, and it looked better straight off the first game of the year. It looked better, and it's taken him a little while to find the rhythm. But I mean, he's hitting everything right now, and as long as the scoring continues this way, I mean, he's going to exceed 5x value at 7-9. It's a great matchup. It's a great pace spot. Sacramento's played a lot faster the last month or so. They were really slow in the beginning of the year. They've sped up. And this game has the game total's over 230. We only have 2 games over 230 tonight. I think him and De'Aaron Fox are going to be probably really elite point guard twos because you're going to play Luka on FanDuel, and then you're probably going to decide, do I play Lonzo or do I play De'Aaron Fox? And I think they're both elite because on the flip side, De'Aaron Fox has a 35% or 35-point fantasy floor. He's done that in 9 straight games. That floor is incredible, and the upside in this massive pace-up spot for Sacramento is tremendous. So I think you can go Lonzo. I think he'll be lesser owned than Fox because you mentioned the price tag is we're not really accustomed to seeing Lonzo up here at near 8K, at least comfortably near where you're like, all right, I'm comfortable using Lonzo at this price tag. Usually it's lower 7s. You're like, oh, I'm going to roster him. But I think Fox gets more ownership. I think Lonzo is definitely a nice GPP pivot off of him.
Now, someone I put in my starting five video at fantasyalarm.com, Grande, Chris Paul. I mean, why not the three-headed monster handling most of the offense when it comes to Oklahoma City? Maybe don't like him as much now that I know that SGA is playing, expected to play with no restriction whatsoever. But there's plenty of shots to go around. Ronas actually has the other two guards in the playbook. I got Chris Paul in the starting five. I think we could come to a consensus that we like OKC guards tonight.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't the same Utah defense. They rank in the bottom 10 over the last month in defensive rating. They rank in the bottom 10 against point guards in terms of fantasy points per game, according to DVP, over the last month. So there's a lot of things trending in Chris Paul, Dennis Schroeder, SGA's favor. And I'm okay with Chris Paul. And the thing about it is, I mean, you see De'Aaron Fox garnering 20+% ownership. You see Elfrid Payton potentially garnering 40+% over on FanDuel. Trae Young, Luka, 36. Like, there is not going to be a lot of people that play Chris Paul, and that's the way they differentiate yourself in tournaments and potentially take down a tournament. If Chris Paul goes for 50 tonight, Fensty, and you get him at 5%, and Lonzo or De'Aaron Fox goes for 35 at 40%, I mean, we're in the driver's seat. So I definitely think it's a good contrarian pivot. If I'm ranking them for cash, I'm probably going to go Fox, Chris Paul, Lonzo. If I am ranking them for GPPs, I'm probably going to go Lonzo, Fox, Paul. I like Paul more in a cash game setting than a tournament. I also really like Lonzo and De'Aaron Fox in tournaments.
Yes, another guard that Ronas has in his playbook tonight that I really like, that I'm actually using against Ronas in a little contest we have on an Alarm After Hours on Sirius 210 XM87 from DFS NBA Beer Pong that we play once a week. Goran Dragic.
Yep.
I mean, now I liked him, Grande, when Jimmy Butler, I didn't know if he was going to be out or not. Now I really love this guy. How good has he been off the bench? You and I talked about how good Schroeder's been, and he should win the Sixth Man of the Year. But you got to put hats off to Dragic, man. Doing with what he can off the bench. Points, assists, leading the second unit. Now no Butler. Give me some Dragic tonight with that price point. 5,100 on FanDuel, 5,500 on DraftKings. Let's do it, man.
Yeah, I mean, he leads this team in usage rate when Jimmy Butler's off the floor, 28.7%. And both you and I know that's an elite mark, no matter who it is. I mean, you take the name away from that usage rate and you say, oh, like Trae Young, right? Or, Luka, right? And it's like, no, it's Goran Dragic, sans Jimmy Butler. Also over a fantasy point per minute. So if you're telling me he's going to get 30 minutes tonight, which is, I think, possible with no Butler, I mean, they need a little scoring punch. I mean, we could be talking about 35 to 40 fantasy point upside, and that wins you a tournament at 5,100.
We just can't have Duncan Robinson hitting 8 or more threes tonight, Grande.
That will hurt.
Big thing, okay?
That will hurt.
That will hurt very much. But still, not much risk at that price point. So let's move on to shooting guard here. Let's keep talking about this Pelicans-Kings game. I'll just say this, Grande. I placed a little wager on the over in this Kings-Pelicans game. I got it at 232. I think that's very fair. I think it's very safe. Both of these teams don't play defense, and Ronas has yet another player from this matchup, Drew Holiday. I mean, you got to love what he was doing. There was a little stretch, Grande, where I actually wondered if Zion Williamson playing full minutes, getting a full workload, being that ingrained in the offense, would hurt Drew Holiday. But it's actually helped him on the assist front a little bit more since Zion came into play. So with that, Drew Holiday now at a major price point, you're still trusting this guy tonight?
Yeah, and it comes down to a position scarcity on FanDuel as well. There's no real spend-ups at shooting guard. I think in a game where you're featuring a 230-plus implied total and you're going to potentially get a guy under 15% on a slate like this, I think it's something that you want exposure to because I think a lot more people are going to play the Kings than they're going to play the Pelicans tonight. And I don't know if that's necessarily smart. I think you play both teams because the game is so appealing, and we do have some ugly-looking games around the entire slate. So
this was not the easiest slate to break down, Grande, and I'm not just saying that as a cop-out. Even making the starting five, those mid-court options were very difficult to choose from. A lot of high-ceiling, low-floor options. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's why I think Drew Holiday stands out to me at shooting guard in tournaments because, the 60-point ceiling we've seen twice in 4 games. So in tournaments, I definitely could get behind some Drew Holiday.
Yep, other players that Ronas has in the playbook, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, may not be 100% in this matchup, but still, again, like Grande and I said, we like all 3 guards tonight in this matchup. I mean, that's who's going to handle the majority of the offense. I don't think there's anything else left to say except, Grande, you want to quickly rank Cash versus GPP, the Thunder guards. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Chris Paul's number 1 in Cash. Okay. I don't think I would play either of them in Cash games. Maybe SGA on DK because his price tag is so cheap, $6,300. I think that's too cheap for him. So I'll go 2 SGA, Schroeder 3, and then tournaments. I think Dennis Schroeder is always an elite tournament play because he's always cheaper than the other guys, and nobody ever plays the guy. We're going to get him at less than 10% as usual. And Dennis Schroeder has this weird thing about him where he goes in stretches where he's elite in terms of fantasy, and then he's 20 fantasy points, 20. He's very volatile, and that's what makes me like him in tournaments. So I would go Schroeder 1 in tournaments, probably Paul 2, and SGA 3. I don't think we should love SGA other than just for a price point play on DK.
Let's go over some value options because it's never easy with Buddy Hield, whereas I feel more confident with Schroeder coming off the bench. With Buddy Hield, sometimes you just get the scoring, Grande, and that makes him very unappealing. But again, we've got the golden matchup, or what should be the golden matchup tonight for a lot of points. And who's going to stop Buddy Hield? No one really.
And it's a revenge narrative. If you're a revenge narrative type of DFS player, I'm very confused on what the role has become for Buddy Hield. Since he's complained about not starting, it's been 25 minutes capped. There's really no exception. There's not an exception in blowouts. There's not an exception when it's a close game. It's 25 minutes, and that's what we're getting out of Buddy Hield. So if you can stomach that and you think he can give us 22 to 23 actual points, fine, because he'll get you 30 fantasy points and he'll exceed 5x, but he played 39 minutes against the Pelicans early in the year. Is he going to do that again? I don't see a scenario where he does. I would probably rather just play his teammate Bogdan Bogdanovic, who is playing 30-plus minutes and just flashed 50 fantasy point upside just the other day.
Yeah, I like him better. I like his handles better as well. So there's the assist factor there with Buddy Hield. Again, like I said, just like with a guy like Duncan Robinson, who Ronas does recommend tonight for a cheap option, especially on FanDuel, $4,900 price point. He is going to get a lot of shots from downtown. He can play minutes at multiple positions. You've seen it by his position flexibility if you're in season-long leagues. But still, with Bogdanovic, has a little bit more of that assist potential to get you multi-category production. Another guy that Ronas has, Grande, in his playbook, he's got Josh Richardson going up against Detroit. Love this even better if Brown ends up not playing, so we'll have to wait and see. But still, at the end of the day, no Simmons, and so Richardson should be getting those shots.
Yeah, I think he's fine, and he's going to be a pretty popular option tonight. I think you can play him. I actually probably like Duncan Robinson for tournaments a little more on FanDuel, where he's 4,900, especially if he keeps shooting the way he's shooting. No Jimmy Butler. I suspect Tyler Hero is on a minutes restriction. He hasn't played since early February, so I assume there's restrictions. So I don't think we'll see any dip in minutes for Duncan Robinson there. So I like Robinson over Richardson. I like Bogdan over Richardson. But, he's fine. And
he's fine. Yeah. And he shouldn't be fine. He should be good. You know why
he should.
He's fine, Grande?
Because he shoots from the perimeter too much.
Thank you. The truth shall set you free. It's the truth. I watch this guy. I throw stuff at my TV. It frustrates me so much to see what this guy did in Miami, and now he's nothing but a camper from the arc. And it's so stupid. And the Sixers, it's right there. Stagger your lineup when everybody's back in. Bring a guy like Richardson in off your bench if you can. Imagine him, Grande. Imagine having this guy being the first guy off your bench. Jack of all trades. He can ball handle. You would never know it because he hangs at the arc. He can attack the rim. You would never know because he just hangs at the arc. I'm sick of it with this guy. And how the Sixers don't see this, I don't understand. Sorry.
That's the Joel Embiid effect right there, Fensty. There it is.
I hate it, man. I just hate it. He can do more than that. He can do more than what we've seen from him this year. I actually like this pickup for them in that trade.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good pickup. He just needs to move his ass inside the arc sometimes, you know?
Right. Jeez, just drive. You did it in Miami. You were a number one option at one point last year. Come on,
Sure.
man. Okay, other shooting guards that I'm looking at, Grande, I want to get your take because we just mentioned Josh Richardson. We just mentioned Duncan Robinson. Two guards that I personally like better. Don't yawn, Grande. I'm not boring you that much, okay?
Not that much. Not that much.
Jeez, I better
Fancy, I don't know if you heard, I have a baby, so yawning happens sometimes.
Dude, I know I do, man. Congratulations.
Thank you. Just had it like almost a month ago.
Look at that. No more baby face. Now you're toddler face. That's what you are now.
Hey, you know what? I hope Howard hears this and I get the promotion up to toddler face.
You gotta love it. You gotta love it. James Grande, he's the man. Love doing live streams with you, Grande. Don't tell him Peppa. No, I'm just kidding. Let's look at two other guards that I personally like, and they're in the same matchup. Number one, we talked about Duncan Robinson, Josh Richardson. I like R.J. Barrett and Kevin Huerter much better than both of those guys. With R.J. Barrett, Ronis has him in the playbook. Great FanDuel price point. Has been scoring a little bit more consistently. They're looking for a number two option in New York. It's looking like it is going to be Barrett the rest of the way. So against Atlanta, doesn't really play any defense. I like it. But then let's talk about Kevin Huerter for a second. They're not your traditional 1-2, Trae Young and Kevin Huerter. Kevin Huerter off the ball sets up Trae Young. I said this in the starting five video. And all of a sudden, Grande, what are we seeing late in the season? More assists from this guy. So the off guard is getting you more assists because Trae Young's got the eternal green light, meaning you can rely on multi-category production. I like both of these guys in the same matchup tonight.
Yeah, and Huerter averaging 32 fantasy points against the Knicks this year, so I think it's a good matchup for him. I prefer his FanDuel price at 51 compared to 58 on DK. I'm a little uncomfortable there, but I definitely like the FanDuel price. Same for Barrett, honestly. I like the FanDuel price a lot more. The scoring has been there, as you mentioned, 9 of 10 in double figures, and we're getting poor shooting efforts out of him too. So it's not like, we could potentially get in a game of like 47% shooting, and we're going to be talking about a guy, putting up 35 fantasy points instead of 25 fantasy points. So as you mentioned, it's an elite matchup for Barrett, and a pretty good matchup for Kevin Huerter too. Honestly, though, in most of my DraftKings lineups, because I mentioned I prefer Barrett and Huerter on FanDuel, I'm just going to go down and play old reliable Gary Harris, who we already touched upon. Ronis has him in the playbook, and it's something that has kind of been in correlation to what you mentioned. Like, Gary Harris is fully back. He's a very good basketball player who is overshadowed by a lot of other really good basketball players on Denver.
I mean, look at what happened to Malik Beasley once he took him off of Denver. Look at what happened to Juan Hernan-Gomez.
Right.
Now those guys are getting to blossom. Denver's one of the deepest teams and has been for the last couple of years in the NBA. So it's hard to always get shots, and that's why when I look at guys like Gary Harris or Will Barton, I'm not the most comfortable giving you those guys, although you know that they know their role and they'll definitely play up to their position. That's what it is.
Yes, and as I agree about the shot attempts completely, because Gary Harris is not a high usage player, but he's been great peripherally. I mean, 2+ steals in 4 straight games, and you mentioned at the top of this live stream, he's an elite defender. It just is what it is. He's an elite perimeter defender, and the steals are coming with that defense. He's hitting the 3-ball 2 back-to-back games with 3+ 3-pointers. He's contributing rebounds, assists, so he's really doing it across the board for us. 26+ fantasy points in 4 straight games, Fensty. His price tag has risen $600, and he's still $4,500 on DraftKings, and nobody plays the guy. So you can play him in whatever format you want, because he's going to get you 25+ fantasy points. He's going to exceed value, and you're going to say, why haven't I been playing Gary Harris for the last week?
Are you still cool with Will Barton? I think that's a fair price point, middle of the road kind of guy.
Yeah, and I think that's a good transition over a small forward, because I am.
Get it.
I mean, it is a good. I mean, it's actually not the worst position tonight, but I like Barton at 5,700, who has continuously been good lately. I mean, another very volatile guy. Like, I'm not going to play him in cash games because he could just bomb our lineups if he has a bad shooting night. But he's been really consistent lately, 5 straight of 25-plus fantasy points. So, yeah, I mean, I think Dallas is exploitable. Dorian Finney-Smith officially ruled out, a very good perimeter defender for them, now not there to guard Barton on the perimeter. So, yes, I think Will Barton is an excellent tournament play at that price tag. I also think he's going to garner a lot of ownership because of that.
Yeah, speaking of a player that's going to garner a lot of ownership, you just mentioned Finney-Smith being out. Tim Hardaway Jr., I mean, we've got Brandon Ingram, who's up there in the 8K range on DraftKings tonight. You've got Tobias Harris, who's there as well. But Ben, you go all the way down in price point. How don't you lock and load Hardaway over those guys tonight, Grande?
You do. And
you just have to.
You just do. I mean, again, he's number 2, 3, and 4 options. It's Luka 1 through it's actually Luka 1 through 3, and then Hardaway options 4 and 5 on the floor. So you just. And it's a great correlation play.
Kleber number 6.
Maxi Kleber number 6. And that's really where where the line is drawn in the sand. I mean, you just if you're playing Hardaway, pair him with Luka. Don't play him naked, just pair him with Luka.
I mean, Tobias Harris still has value with Simmons off the floor. We'll have to see Embiid's involvement, but still, as long as Tobias Harris, another guy who just, if he slashes more, he'll have more success. We've seen it at times. And with Brandon Ingram as well, I mean, you know what you're paying for in this matchup. However, the other side of that matchup, Harrison Barnes, Ronas has him in the playbook. He's screwed me so many times this year, Grande. Harrison Barnes, I feel like I've missed every single time. Talk about a golden sombrero. I've literally struck out 4 times on this guy this year.
Yeah, your Harrison Barnes is my Rudy Gobert. I can't get Rudy Gobert correct no matter what. I think Harrison Barnes is a really safe cash game play or whatever format you really want to play him in. I mean, we've talked about Kings, Pelicans throughout this live stream. Why stop now at a guy who went for 40 fantasy points against him earlier in the year? That's 30 actual in that game. Hasn't seen any minutes deduction since the return of Rashawn Holmes. That hasn't impacted him at all. Shouldn't impact him at all either. They love playing Harrison Barnes because of his length on the perimeter as a defender. And, I mean, he's just literally getting us 5X every game. I don't see why we wouldn't play him in an up-tempo game against the Pelicans, against a bad defense. I mean, everything just lines up for Harrison Barnes. And look, Fancy, it's another situation where no one's going to play because everyone thinks like you. It's like, I've been burned by Harrison Barnes so much. He's boring. He's a turkey sandwich without the mayo, without the cheese. He's just turkey on bread. Like, that's honestly, I don't know how else to describe it. It's just like you're eating. You got your paper bag. You bring the lunch. You're sitting in your office, and then you take out a turkey sandwich. No mayo, no cheese. Harrison Barnes for you. But you know what? That turkey sandwich is Boar's Head, and it's getting the job done right now, and I'm going to keep playing them. And I'm going to keep eating the Boar's Head turkey sandwiches.
There you go. Nice, Grande. No condiments for you.
No, definitely condiments for me. No condiments for Harrison Barnes.
I'll say this, too. I just want to say this, Grande. Rashawn Holmes should not impact Barnes' minutes because Holmes is going to be shifting up to the 5 a good amount. It'll be him and Alex Len doing that. So Bjelica's there at the 4 still. So Barnes should be able to have some time, some crevice in some time there still, even with Holmes once he does get a full workload, at least in my opinion.
Well, I was just saying it because they have been giving Harry Giles quite a bit of run lately. If they want to run a lineup where they're playing Holmes and Giles at the 4 and the 5, they could potentially put Bjelica at the 3, which would impact Barnes. I mean, that would be a massive lineup because, Bjelica is a big dude. But it's not like we've seen him play small forward in the past. So that was my thinking along the, maybe when Holmes down the line is playing more minutes and maybe they're still giving Harry Giles the run. But we haven't seen it, and Barnes is still playing 33-plus minutes every night.
Right. Now, let's move on to a position where I think you have so many options. You have an entire buffet of options, and that's power forward. Now, John Collins, Ronas has him in there for obvious reasons, Grande, but I'm a little bit worried. 2 injuries he's dealing with. Not 100%. Not saying that we shouldn't use him, but when I see other guys like Adebayo, Randall with this low price point, I don't know how I don't go for one of those 2 guys instead of John Collins.
I mean, right. And Fancy, the fact of the matter is on FanDuel, they're both cheaper than John Collins, too. And Bam is without Jimmy Butler against Charlotte. The creme de la creme matchup against center. I mean, that is the nuts. Bam should be. Bam was the first player in all my lineups. That Luka and Bam were the first two players I put in every lineup tonight. I'm not missing that opportunity. I'm even going to pay $9K for Bam on DK. I hope that's more contrarian. I hope it scares people away because he's going to go. He can go for 60. He's a point guard in a center's body. It's crazy. He's elite as it comes. And then you mentioned Randall. I mean, maybe it's a blessing that he only played 26 minutes and fouled out last night.
It was.
Because now we get him against Atlanta.
And I said this in the starting five video. Everybody's going to be off of him because now they haven't seen a double-double in a few games. This is a perfect bounce-back spot for him. He went for about, and I don't know if I'm exactly correct here, I believe he went for 38 and 15 against them last time out. I know, granted, it was double overtime. 38 and 15. That's nothing to mess with right there.
Yeah, I mean, he's averaging. So, like, even if he went for 15 rebounds and you're like, oh, well, that's a little high. He's averaging 14 and a half against them in 2 games. So that means the first game he went for 14 rebounds, just quick math. I'm a math expert here. But, Fancy, you know what you call all this? Recency bias. And sometimes we play against the bias and we don't play someone that burns us. Like if we played Julius Randle last night, maybe we don't play him tonight because he burned us. But maybe we're on the other side of the fence and we say, you know what? And this is how you have to think as a DFS player. You have to X out the slate prior and the slates prior because you can't ignore a matchup against Atlanta. And this is where you get your exposure to the Knicks. I know a lot of people are going to go Elfrid Payton, and that's another recency bias place because Elfrid Payton got benched for most of that game. It's Atlanta. It's Atlanta's front court. You're getting a banged-up John Collins, a foul-happy John Collins. Dwayne Dedmon can only play 20 minutes. They're playing a smaller DeAndre Hunter at the 4. Like, everything lines up for Julius Randle, and everything lines up for him to be lower owned than normal because of how bad he's been the last 2 games. Recency bias giveth, recency bias taketh away. And tonight, giveth.
Yeah, and I giveth more to the number one options on teams, and that's what Julius Randle is. No team goes unturned. We're looking for the value. We're looking for where we can hit, and even these teams that are going to become more wasteland types, they still have opportunity attached to them and great values. You just got to dig a little bit. That's what we're here to help you do. A few more power forwards. Now, he has Horford in there, but Ronis does note, as smart as he is, that if Embiid is out, Horford is a good play. Embiid is not out. So with that, that's a very risk-reward type of play, even though it is against Detroit. Maxi Kleber, who I mentioned, somebody else has to score, Grande, on this team, and Kleber can help stretch the floor.
Yeah, Kleber's just a solid value, and he's going to be very popular, and it's another game. It's another scenario where you play him in cash. You can fade him in tournaments. That's fine. But do you just put him in your cash game lineups? You're not going to get a better price tag for a guy that we've seen go for 35, 40 fantasy points with Kristaps Porzingis out. And a lot of the attention is obviously going to be on Luka. A lot of the attention is going to be on Tim Hardaway Jr. And, Maxey can get lost in the shuffle from the Denver defense. And I really like that play. Plus, Denver's not as good on the road. So, I think they're more exploitable defensively when they're not in Denver, when the opponents are sucking for air because they can't breathe in Denver, I'm just saying, it's whatever. So I think Maxi Kleber, get him in your cash games. You can fade him in tournaments. But if you're building one lineup, I don't suggest you full fade him.
We get into everything on this live stream, including high-altitude sickness.
Listen, hey, man, we talk about weather in baseball. We got to talk about high altitudes in Denver and why Denver's so good at home and why no one else can play well in Denver. There has to be something to that. Just like the ball traveling out of Coors Field 1,000 times a year. Altitude doesn't lie.
That's right. Michael Air Jordan never lies. We've seen it. Let's move on to center, the final position, because especially if you're a FanDuel player, this is not going to be as easy. So you've got Joel Embiid, who's now in Ronis, has him in the playbook. Expected lower ownership on DraftKings, 10.5 on DraftKings, 9K on FanDuel. What do you think of Joel Embiid? Are you worried about any kind of minutes restriction with him?
So I'm definitely worried at 10.5 on DraftKings. I'm not totally sure what they're thinking with that price tag. I don't know what the reasoning is behind it. I'm looking around right now, and I don't see anything about a restriction. Like, he's playing. I also am unsure, Fancy, especially at the time of the year it is, if he would come back if he wasn't 100%. And I get it, it's Detroit, and maybe they just want to get his feet wet and, 25 minutes. But, like, why are you potentially risking your best player's long-term, like the longevity of his tenure with you for a game against Detroit if he's not healthy? So
no, that's true. And they really, I hate to say it because I don't like when players just rest. They don't need him for this game.
Right.
But Detroit just decimated by their own injuries, so they really don't need him. So that's why I'm probably not going to play him. I get it if you do, because
FanDuel's cheap, Fancy. The FanDuel price is appealing. I
can't deny that. DK, though, 10-5.
Yeah, no chance. No chance.
Now, Mitchell Robinson, we've talked about him. The difference between Mitchell Robinson over the last few weeks, a month, than the rest of the season, fewer fouls. Starting to maybe get in control of that. And the price point is still very fair at $5,700 on both sites because his matchup for the evening is Dwayne Dedmon. Right. So it's not a hard matchup. So both of them should be able to produce in this one. Someone else that I have in the starting five video, Steven Adams. Now, I know we're waiting for an injury update on Rudy Gobert, but even if he does play, you can attack Rudy Gobert. Adams has had not one, but two double-digit rebounding games against the Jazz this year. I know he's not a fun pick. I know it seems more of a high-risk, high-reward, but for tonight, he got a double-double last time. If Rudy Gobert is out, makes it oh so sweeter, and especially on FanDuel, very tough to decide for center tonight, Grande.
So, Fancy, as you said Rudy Gobert's name, his status for tonight's game was updated. And his status, and I'm so happy to inform you that I do not have to play Rudy Gobert tonight because he is officially listed as out. I don't even have to deal with anything to do with Rudy Gobert.
You don't. Man, dude,
music to my ears.
He used to be, you know who the new Rudy Gobert is? Jonas Valanciunas.
True.
Jonas Valanciunas is the new, because until Jaren Jackson Jr. or Brandon Clark come back, lock this guy in for a double-double pretty much every single night, if not every night. But he's not on the slate. He has nothing to do with this discussion. Steven Adams, though, he definitely does. And this is someone that I'm going to be starting a whole lot of tonight, Grande.
Yeah, and now it's Tony Bradley. And that's who we're going to get defensively for Steven Adams. There obviously are concerns, and that's probably why Ronis didn't include him. The minutes are obviously a concern. They fluctuate between 20 and 30. Like, we could get the ceiling of 30, and if we get the ceiling of 30, there's 50-point upside. We know it. We've seen Steven Adams dominate in that time. There is also the 20-minute floor where he could just get us like 22, 30 fantasy points, and then we're missing out on potential value options like a Tony Bradley or like a Thon Maker, who we're going to get to in a second.
You've already gotten him. You just did.
Right. Well, I haven't. Steven Adams' point is that I'm not going to trust him necessarily in cash just because the volatility lately. And I think if this were a month ago, I would say Steven Adams at 5'9", lock and load for cash. But, maybe it's due to the fact that they keep winning and they don't need to expend him now, and they're going to use him for the postseason is a reason why he's not playing all these minutes. I'm not in the mind of Billy Donovan. I don't necessarily know why. But until then, it's a GPP play only. I'm going to play Thon Maker or I'm going to play Tony Bradley in cash.
All right, a couple of other centers. Again, how much do we like this Knicks-Hawks game? A lot of points have been scored in matchups with these two teams. Even Bobby Portis and Dwayne Dedmon are on Ronis's playbook. Bobby Portis starting to put up a little bit of consistency with the scoring, Grande.
I just don't know if we're going to see Bobby Portis continue to play this way because like last night, for example, we mentioned, Ronis and I were doing the podcast last night, and the Knicks checked their guys out 4 minutes into the game, mass sub, 5 starters, and Portis came in and was hot. And he's a very streaky player. He's a good scorer in bunches, but another volatile guy who, if he's not hitting his shot, is going to be taken off the floor for Mitchell Robinson, or they're going to go back to Taj Gibson for whatever reason. So it's a tournament play only. Ultimately, though, Fancy is in Atlanta. like he's playing Atlanta. So,
right.
I mean,
should be easy, but
right. I mean, there's going to be open shots. Dwayne Dedmon's not going to chase him to the perimeter if he has open looks out there.
There are
So,
going to be open shots on both sides.
Agreed.
So these big men, you can pretty much lock and load with trust.
agreed.
So, especially Julius Randle. Again, till they make him AK, I'm going to pretty much lock and load every night, even if he is coming off of a bad game like he kind of did last night. Someone who never comes off a bad game. At @the_real_Grande. That is James Grande. I'm Justin Fensterman at FenST Sports. And make sure you catch Alarm After Hours every weeknight, midnight to 2 a.m. Eastern. Tonight, me and Adam Ronis will be talking a lot of hoops with all of you. Some baseball will get in as well. Series 210, XM87. For Grande, I'm FenSty, the DFS NBA live stream here on FantasyAlarm.com. Good luck and always dominate. Why? There is no other option. That's why. Good luck and win.